Have you ever looked at your resume and just thought, I've worked so hard, but there's nothing on here that really sounds impressive? Like, none of this experience is going to get me the job. None of this is related to the job description. And I have definitely been there. And a lot of the times, people in their 20s think that they're behind and that they lack experience, they lack the credibility, they lack the skills and the tools that the job description actually needs. And then we get through the catch 22. It's like, well, I need a job to get experience, but I don't have enough experience to get the job. And so then we're just in this endless loop, and it can feel overwhelming and we can feel like we've failed. It's not actually that we lack experience, is that we don't know how to extract value from the experience. Hi, guys. Welcome back to Her Career, Her Way, a podcast all about inspiring ambitious individuals by giving them the tools, strategies, and having honest conversations to help navigate your chaotic career when you're building it in your 20s. And as a 20-something-year-old, I definitely empathize. This episode is going to help you stop underestimating your experience and understand how to articulate it into real career leverage. And so we're going to reframe the way that you describe your experiences and really understand how to extract value from it. Because I guarantee you, you have experiences that are so valuable to a job, a company, to whatever you're looking at. You're just not understanding how to actually identify those values and articulate it into something that can be conducive for your interviews, for your storytelling, for your narrative, whatever it might be to grow in your career. And also, this isn't just about your career, but it's also about how to extract value from any experiences or opportunities because we tend to underestimate our experiences a lot. And I just want to go into the underestimated role. And I feel like this role is something that a lot of people do. It is something that is very entry level, and a lot of university students do it. A lot of, honestly, high schoolers do it. It's something that is so underestimated, but so important. And this underestimated role is the customer service role. And I think working in customer service is probably one of the most important roles and jobs that you can have in your career at any stage. I have worked in a lot of customer service roles, as I'm sure many people have, and I think it's one of the most basic roles that one can take. I also think it is the foundation for the jobs that follows, and it gives you those fundamental skills that you need for your future career. And so some of the customer service jobs that I've had is that I've been a barista, a coffee barista. I really loved it. It was definitely difficult. That was my first job besides babysitting and things like that. And then second is I've been a sales associate for numerous of companies, a lot of fashion companies. And that really teaches you the intricacies of how supply works, how accounting works. I've also worked in more of a family run business and then also more of a corporate business with the sales associate. So looking at those, I really noticed differences, which I can definitely go into, which I will later. And then I've also worked as a front of house staff member for a performing arts center. And this definitely taught me about just how to navigate that backstage role, how to deal with customer inquiries, a little bit more upscale because you're at a theater and a lot of times it was for opera and more professional settings like that. So making sure you dress the part, making sure you're in all black and things like that. What I think is in common with these customer service roles is that you are able to work in a fast-paced environment. You have to really develop your empathy skills to understand what the client needs and how to anticipate their desires as well. And it's really high pressure and there's a lot of emotional regulation that goes on. I also think it teaches you humility and being humble because you never know what kind of customer you're going to get, and they can be having a really, really bad day. And more than not, they project it onto you, and you have to be able to learn how to deal with it, not take it personally, and understand that at the end of the day, you are serving them, that you do have to provide value and you do have to support them in whatever they're doing, even if they're not being the nicest. And it is to say, like, if they are really mistreating you, you have every single right to flag it to your manager or whatever, because humanity is still very much important. But I am saying, like, if they're a little bit short with you, if they're like, it's been 20 minutes when it's really been 5, you don't really say to the customer that it's actually been 5 minutes, like, calm down. No, you try to reframe it in a way that's more positive. And instead of saying no, you always look for a yes, how to accommodate for them. And you have to be quick on your feet with this. And so this is why I think it's so important to have these customer service roles because you're in that high paced environment. You are building those relationships with and you have to be so adaptable. And you also are working with a team. So it requires collaboration, which is a huge skill. And I was talking to one of my friends in HR, and one of the most important skills that they were talking about, just in general, to have is definitely collaboration, communication, and customer orientation and really building that relationship. And so with this customer service role, I think you can really gain all of those fundamental skills that are necessary for whatever future job that you're going into. I also feel like companies really appreciate when you have this sales associate or a customer service role because it shows how you have also been dedicated to working at such an early stage in your career and that you're putting yourself out there and that you are developing these skills. And so I think it can really just, make leverage you in your career as well. And so something of what that I wanted to talk about in the differences between my more family-owned sales associate role and then the corporate one is that with the family-owned one, especially with just startups in general, is that you are able to wear so many multiple hats during this because it's a smaller company, so you can be more ingrained and they actually need you more. And so with this, I was able to learn more about the finances. Able to learn more about the inventory and how to track that also building relationships with customers and being that face that they can come into and that they just know that they are comfortable with telling you what they need and what they feel. And also, one of the things that I've really gained in these sales associate roles is how to reframe a situation in the mind of a consumer. And as one of my professors say, value lies in the mind of the customer and nowhere else. And I just think it's so important to be so customer focused and oriented, especially in the sales associate and customer service roles. I mean, it's in the name, customer service. And being able to be in that mindset in these roles is so crucial because you have to adapt to how to service them. For example, I'm going to do one of my fashion roles and show you how I reframed it in the mindset of the customer. So sometimes a customer came in and they were feeling not so confident. They wanted to get an outfit, but they weren't feeling comfortable in maybe their body and just their perspective. They had an event that they needed to go to and they needed help buying an outfit. And so when they come in and they try on clothes, well, first you ask them, what kind of event is it? You tailor it to their experience. And then you go on and ask, okay, what colors do you like? Do you like a longer dress? Do you like a shorter dress? Whatever it might be. And then when they're in that fitting room, that's where you personalize it. And that's where you really make them feel at home and comfortable. And so when they step out and they ask you, how do they look? I always ask them, well, how do you feel? How do you feel in this outfit? Because I want them to understand what they are feeling in this outfit. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what they feel and how they are going to step out into the world in this new outfit and feel confident because that's all about enclothed cognition is when you are putting on an outfit that you feel so confident in, you exude that confidence then radiates out towards whatever event that you're doing. And so by asking them how they feel, it puts the perspective again back to the customer. Another thing that customer service does is that constant problem solving. You're always trying to solve problems and you have to be quick about it. And that's so important whether you're working in a company and maybe a higher job, you're always constantly having to adapt and react and be proactive to whatever environmental stimulus is coming into your company, which is what I talked about in the last episode. And so basically, the key thing about customer service roles is about learning how humans, systems, and processes all work and pressure interact with each other. And so definitely reflect back on one of your roles. I'm sure more than not, you've probably worked in a customer service role, and it can be hospitality, it can be administration, it can be in a restaurant. There's so many ways that customer service can come. And this is one of the fundamental roles I think is so necessary in starting out in your career. And so now I want to tie in a little bit of psychology and neuroscience because it wouldn't be her career her way without it. There are two psychologists named Amos Tversky and David Kahneman, and they created this psychological concept in the 1970s and 80s called the familiarity bias. And what happens with this concept is that we tend to undervalue what feels normal to us. And we do this because we think that our opportunities and our experiences that we've lived are just ordinary and that everybody is doing it. There's nothing really special. It's like that mentality of if I can do it, it must not be a skill. And this is where I feel especially that 20s feel is because we are still so new to our careers and developing these fundamental skills that we need in the job force and also just in life in general that we tend to feel like we lack this experience. But really, we are just feeling this familiarity bias where that we're not really realizing the value of what we do and the learning opportunities. And this tends to result in missing growth opportunities because we're so set on that nothing we do is important that we aren't actually seeing how these opportunities can be the catalyst for other opportunities or things like that. And we're not realizing how to articulate the value in what we do. For instance, this can come when we are trying to learn a new language or something. It's that because we're so familiar and comfortable with our own language and what we already learn, we tend to gravitate towards something that's more familiar, even though we want to learn that new language and we want to put ourselves out there. But because we have this familiarity with this, we tend to gravitate towards that. However, we're missing that opportunity to learn something, to make mistakes, to grow and learn because when you are learning something, you're bound to make a mistake. You're bound to be in that learning curve. And our brains don't want to do that hard effort. So we tend to just stick with what we know instead of going on that learning curve. Because yes, at first it will be hard, but then it pays off when we are consistent. And I think this is really a reality in hiring in that employers are consistently ranking thinking skills over titles. And I was listening to a Harvard Business Review podcast about what executive recruitment are looking for and what these consulting companies are looking for. And it's interesting that they're actually prioritizing the liberal arts majors instead of the typical economic business majors because they want that creative aspect. It's because they want to go into the unknown. They don't want to stick with the familiarity of what these thinking and analytical skills that a lot of business students have. They want to look into the creative lens and see how that can grow their company instead. And also, the World Economic Forum listed some of its top skills that they're looking at, and it's mainly analytical, creative, resilience, curiosity, and service. And so, this is what I was talking about in these customer service roles being resilient. Oh my gosh, resilience is so important. Being able to adapt when you make a mistake. And that's also something they talked about in the McKinsey podcast about they weren't looking for that perfect score. They were looking for people that were able to take the scores that they had and improve on it, seeing how that they could take something that was maybe suboptimal and maximize it to their learning potential, to the growth potential. And so it's not about perfection. It's about resilience and adaptability. And it's also about being creative, not conventional, not sticking to what you know, but expanding from it. I also found a LinkedIn survey by a guy named Robertson, and he owns, I believe he's like an HR executive. And he talked about that a learner's mindset is absolutely critical, especially nowadays. And people with fixed mindsets are really at a disadvantage and are going to struggle in this economy and this employment landscape. And so, what the key value and the key takeaway from this is that valuable skills are built in how you show up and how you remain curious to expansion and not just staying comfortable with what you already know. And then the neuroscience that I wanted to tie into is called the immersion metric. And I just also want to preface when I'm tying in all of these psychological and also neuroscience topics, I am not a professional in these fields. This is just based on my research, which I always link in the bio. If you want to take a look more about the case studies, I find it really interesting. But do take it with a grain of salt because this is the information that I've found and that I've researched to just add in a little bit of credibility. But I am nowhere a professional. So I just do want to state that. So basically, what this immersion metric is that it is the value an individual places on an experience. And this was founded by Paul Zak, who is a neuroscientist at Claremont Graduate University. And what it was is that he did a study on a storytelling. And one way he told a story was he told a story about a boy who had cancer and went through chemotherapy and lost all of his hair. And he talked about cancer and how hard it was for the little boy and the dad who was caring for him. The second story showed the boy who didn't have any hair, but it didn't mention cancer at all. The boy with his father at the zoo, and they were just going along. It didn't mention anything about cancer. And what they found throughout the study is that the first one, where they talked about the cancer and the emotional turmoil that the father and the child were going through from this circumstance, that elevated that dopamine level, which helps enhance that focus and learning. And it also increased oxytocin, which is that second neurotransmitter. And this was due to that emotional engagement that the listeners felt. This helps enhance memory and also meaning about what the story is and how it resonates with the learner. And I just thought this was really interesting because I feel like in those customer service roles and in those high pressure, people facing landscapes, it literally wires that adaptability and judgment. And I feel that it really does release that dopamine and oxytocin, which helps with that focus and learning and also that memory retention. And I thought this case study was just so important because it shows how much value you can extract out of an experience and a story if you frame it in the right way. So, what I got out of my customer service roles when I integrated this knowledge is that these are really fast paced and that I'm building relationships and that I'm problem solving. And it's all about adaptability and judgment in a landscape that I have to think so quickly. I have to use my critical thinking skills and also maintain composure. And I think this is the point of tying in these kind of brainy concepts and how the brain works because we can utilize it to enhance our experiences and our mindset into a conducive way in a conducive way for us. And this also explains how experience builds intuition and that you're more capable than you actually think you are. You just need to understand where the value is coming from. And so now I want to move on to an actionable framework because I love these because it kind of ties up and summarizes what we've been talking in this episode and how you can go off and reflect and actually take action. As much as it's important to read and listen and learn from all these different sources, from tutors, lectures, whatever, coffee chats, whoever it is, you really gain the most learning by taking action and experiencing it. And so, very fitting for this framework is the experience. This is the mnemonic device. And so, this is the experience framework and how you can extract value out of your experiences. And so, what E stands for is the environment. What conditions were you working under? Was it fast paced? Was it more slow paced? Was it high stakes or was it kind of low stakes? Understanding what kind of environment you were in can help set the stage about where you were and how you responded. Number X is that X factor moment. So, what was something that you had to adapt to, or what was something that maybe went wrong? And this is kind of that turning point, that climactic point of where, things haven't been going well. And how did you react to it? Or how were you proactive in a sense? And so P is the problems you solved. Well, how did you solve that problem? How did you respond to it? Was it something, a time pressure? Was it a system that needed recalculating or whatever? And then E is that emotional intelligence. What emotional intelligence did you use? Was it listening? Was it patience? Was it de escalation, empathy? What of those? And then R is the results. What happened at the end? How were you able to solve whatever this was? What was the outcome? And then I is the insight gain. What did you learn from this experience? How can you take this experience and apply it to a different one in the future? How can you use your past learnings to inform your future ones? And then CE is that employer language. How are you going to make this relevant to the job that you're applying to? How are you going to translate this into skills? And what I think this framework does so well is that you're able to take an experience first, extract all this value from the experience and then translate it into those bullet points that you want that are actually actionable towards your CV or whatever it is. Because more than not, I feel like we tend to sit down and we're trying to build our resume, build our CV, but we actually don't know what we want to put on it. And yes, we're told that we need to make them more action verbs. So maintained, organized, lead, whatever it is. And we have to put those percentage marks in it. And it just gets so confusing. And I think I referenced this also with my vision board. It was doing that action board instead. What are the goals that you want to achieve? And then visualize it. Here, it's extracting the value and then presenting it into a simplified list. And it also helps you build that storytelling narrative that you can use in your interviews. And more than not, people, when they look through your CV and when you're having interviews or whatever, they actually want you to explain it to them and story tell it, not just list what you've done, because they can read that. But it's how you communicate what your experiences meant and how you're going to leverage them in the future job or for that company. And so, an example of utilizing this experience framework, I'll do my barista one because it was my first one, and it's fun to kind of flash back and see how I've navigated things. So, it was out of this little trailer park, and the environment was pretty tiny. I was the only person there. It was, I'm the one serving. I got call orders. I also had in-person orders, and I was young. I was maybe 17 years old. And so it was definitely fast paced. It wasn't high stakes, but it felt like that, when there's a lot of call orders coming in and you have the in-person people, who to prioritize. Well, you prioritize the people in front of you, and then you let the phone people know, like, it's going to take this X amount of time because I have these people in front of me, whatever. And so the X factor moment was when the espresso machine broke down. Now, that moment, I was clueless. I didn't know what to do. I mean, to make coffee, you need the espresso machine other than drip coffee or whatever it is. And so I was at a loss of what to do. And so that was the problem. That was the X factor moment when the espresso machine broke down. So how did I solve it? Well, I first let the customers know that the espresso machine was down, but I could make alternative drinks like the drip coffee or make the iced coffee for them. Then I also called my managers because I needed to let them know that the machine went down and if they could get a technician to come in and to solve it. And so I was being proactive in the sense that I was letting the customers know, because when you let them know and that you're more transparent, the more empathy that they have for you. Then they understand why they can't get their latte or their cappuccino or whatever it is. And then I was reactive in the sense that I called my managers to let them know and to get help because I needed that support. And something that I find so important is that it's more crucial to let someone know early on of a problem than later, and to ask those questions and to really be honest, because then you can learn from there. If you don't tell them, then you're actually hindering the business because you're letting the problem go on and on. And yes, it is important to balance when you need to step up and take initiative and maybe see how you can solve this before asking someone. But in these kind of high paced environments where it's so important to get the product out there or serve the customer or whatever it is, it's important to lean on your other members to help support you and to solve this problem together. So it's all context dependent. So, obviously take it with a grain of salt. And then that emotional intelligence that I learned is that I needed to have that composure. I couldn't freak out because freaking out would not serve me in this instance. I maintained that composure. And when I did that, then instead of my limbic system taking over that emotionally regulated state, I was able to actually use my logical brain and see, okay, well, what do I need to do? I need to let the customers know, and I need to tell my manager to help them support me. And so the emotional intelligence there was just having that composure and also having that communication and transparency early on. And then the result was is that, the customers were happy that they still were able to get their drip coffee or whatever it was. And the espresso machine did get fixed later on. It wasn't that day, but it was the next day. And so it all worked out in the end. And so the insights that I gained is that when you're transparent and honest early on, people have more empathy for you, as I explained before. It also built that trust with those customers. It also taught me that just because one thing happens, it doesn't mean it's the end all. Just because the espresso machine broke down, it doesn't mean that I can't serve other drinks. I just have to make it clear that there are alternatives. So being able to pivot was really important. It also, I learned about myself that it's important to have that communication and that collaborative aspect because I really love to do things myself and really figure it out on my own. But sometimes you need that extra hand and support, and that's okay to really help the business and to have a fruitful outcome in the end. And so, how I can translate these skills is that I was able to improve my communication and my transparency and my problem solving skills and also ability to adapt. And so, those are the things that you can extract out of those experiences. And so, really, what this framework is all about is that your job isn't just what you did, it's about how you handled it, how it trained you to handle it. And I really hope this framework helps you kind of extract value from your experiences. And you don't need a new job. You don't need several of jobs to make you more hireable. You just need to have a new lens on your experiences that you already did. And yeah, just don't underestimate the value that you have. And it's all about how you frame it. And so, really dive into those experiences and learn that you probably are underestimating a lot of the skills that you have. So, from this episode, I'd love for you guys to pick a role that you've done and rewrite it using this framework. See how you can extract value from it. And I'd love to know and hear about it in the comments below or DM me, whatever you want to do on Instagram. And that's how confidence is built through that clarity, through understanding what you can bring to the table. Because more than not, I assure you, you probably have been underestimating your own skills. I know I have, and that can feel overwhelming. So I hope this episode was helpful. And the next episode is going to be another one on this upskilling series. And we're going to be talking all about how it's so important to keep up to date on the new skills that are in the job market and to really just be curious and have that learning mindset, which I talked about. If you resonated with this episode, send it to a friend who's maybe underestimating their experiences and their values and skill set that they have. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.